Wanderer of the Wasteland, Chapter 6. That night in the dead late hours, Adam suddenly awoke. The night seemed the same as all the desert nights, dark and cool under the mesquites, the same dead, unbroken silence. Adam's keen intenseness could not detect the slightest sound of wind, brush, or beast. Something had pierced his slumbers, and as he pondered deeply, there seemed to come out of the vagueness beyond that impenetrable wall of sleep a voice, a cry, a whisper. Had Margarita, sleeping or waking, called to him? Such queer visitations of mind, often repeated, had convinced Adam that he possessed a mystic power or sense. When Adam awoke late, in the light of the sunny morning, unrealities of the night dispersed, like the gray shadows, and vanished. He arose eager, vigorous, breathing hard, instinctively seeking for action. The day was Sunday. Another idle wait, fruitful of brooding moods. But he vowed he would not go to the willow brakes, there to hide from Gerd and Collishaw. Let them have their say, do their worst. He would go up to Boccaccio and gamble and drink with the rest of the drifters. Maryvale's words of desert learned wisdom rang through Adam's head. As for Margarita, all Adam wanted was one more look at her face, into her dusky eyes, and that would forever end his relation to her. At breakfast, Arrhenius presented a thoughtful and forbidding appearance, although this demeanor was somewhat softened by the few times he broke silence. The Signora's impassive serenity lacked its usual kindliness, and her lowered eyes kept their secrets. Margarita had not yet arisen. Adam could not be sure there was really a shadow hovering over the home or in his own mind, coloring, darkening his every prospect. After breakfast, he went out to stroll along the river bank and then around the village. He is certain from Maryvale that Collishaw, Gerd, and their associates had found lodgings at different houses for the night, and after breakfast had left for the mining camp. As usual, Maryvale spoke pointedly. Your brother said they were going to clear out the camp, and I reckon he didn't mean greasers, but whiskey and gold. Son, you stay away from Boccaccio today. For once, however, the kind old man's advice fell upon deaf ears. Adam had to fight his impatience to be off up the canyon, and only a driving need to see Margarita held him there. He walked to and fro from the village to the river and back again. By and by he espied Arrhenius and his wife with their friends dressed in their best, parading toward the little adobe church. Margarita was not with them. Adam waited a little while, hoping to see her appear. He did not analyze his strong hope that she would go to church this Sunday as usual. But as no sign of her was forthcoming, he strode down to the little brown house and entered at the open door. Margarita, he called. No answer broke the quiet. His second call, however, brought her from her room, a dragging figure with a pale face that Adam had never before seen so pale. Senor Adam, she faltered. The look of her and that voice stung Adam out of the gentleness habitual with him. Leaping at her, he dragged her into the light of the door. She cried out in a fear that shocked him. When he let go of her, abrupt and sharp in his emotions, she threw up her arms as if to ward off attack. Do you think I would hurt you? He cried harshly. No, Margarita, I only wanted to see you just once more. She dropped her arms and raised her face. Then Adam, keen in that poignant moment, saw in her the passing of an actual fear of death. It struck him mute. and it betrayed her. What had been the dalliance of yesterday, playful and passionate in the wild youth through the night, had become dishonor. Yesterday she'd been a cat that loved to be stroked. Today she was a maimed creature and a broken woman. "Lift your face higher," said Adam hoarsely, as he put out a shaking hand to touch her, but he could not touch her. She did lift it and looked at him, denying nothing, still unashamed. But now there was soul in that face. Adam felt it lined on his memory forever. The stark truth of her frailty, the courage of a primitive nature, fearing only death, yearning for brutal blows as proof of the survival of jealous love, a dawning consciousness of his honesty and truth. Terrible was it for Adam to realize that if she had been given that choice again, she would have decided differently. But it was too late. "Adios, señorita," he said, bowing, and backed out of the door. He stopped in the small pale face with its tragic eyes, straining unutterably eloquent of wrong to him and to herself, passed slowly out of his sight. Swiftly Adam strode up the canyon, his fierce energy in keeping with his thoughts. He overtook the Irishman, Reagan, who accosted him. "Hello, Wansfield, old friend," he called. "Don't yez walk so dumb fast." "Wansfield, why do you call me that?" asked Adam. How curiously the name struck his ear. "Ain't that your name?" "No, it's not." "Well, all right. Will yez have a drink?" Reagan produced a brown bottle and handed it to Adam. They walked on up the canyon, and Reagan, with his short, stunted legs, being hard put to it to keep up with Adam's long strides. The Irishman would attach himself to Adam. Well, that was evident, and he was a most talkative and friendly fellow. Whenever he got out of breath, he halted to draw out the bottle. The liquor in an ordinary hour would have befuddled Adam's wits, but now it only heated his blood. "Wansfeld, if yez ain't the darndest, funniest young feller these diggins," ejaculated Reagan. "Thank you, friend, but don't call me that queer name. Mine's Adam." "Adam?" echoed Reagan. "What the hell of a name. Adorn and Eve, huh? I seen yez with that black-eyed wench. She's pretty." They finished the contents of the bottle and proceeded on their way. Reagan waxed warmer in his regard for Adam and launched forth a strong argument in favor of their going on a prospecting trip. "Yez would make a fine prospector and pard," he said. "Out on the desert, yez are free and happy, begorra. No place like the desert, pard, when yez come to know it. There's air to breathe and long days with the sun on your back, and nights when a mon knows slap. Maybe we'll hae the luck to find Pegleg Smith's lost gold mine." "Who was Pegleg Smith, and what gold mine did he lose?" queried Adam. Then, as they plodded on up the canyon, trying to keep to the shady strips and out of the hot sun, Adam heard for a second time the story of the famous lost gold mine. Reagan told it differently, perhaps exaggerating after the manner of prospectors, but the story was impelling to any man with a drop of adventurous blood in his veins. The lure of gold had not yet obsessed Adam, but he had begun to feel the lure of the desert. Adam concluded that under happier circumstances, this Reagan would be a man well worth cultivating in spite of his love for the bottle. They reached the camp about noon and had a lunch at the stand of a Chinaman, and then entering the saloon, they mingled with the crowd, where Adam soon became separated from Reagan. Liquor flowed like water. and gold thudded in sacks and clinked musically in coins upon the tables. Adam had one drink, and that incited him to take another. Again, the throb and the burn of his blood warmed out the coldness and bitterness of his mood. Deliberately he drank, and deliberately he stifled the voice of conscience until he was in a reckless and dangerous frame of mind. There seemed to be a fire consuming him now, to which liquor was only fuel. He swaggered through the crowded hall, and for once the drunken miners, the painted hags, the cold-faced gamblers did not disgust him. The smell of rum and smoke, the feel of the thick sand under his feet, and the sight of the motley crowd of shirt-sleeved and booted men, the discordant din of music, glasses, gold, and voices. All these sensations struck him full and intimately with their proof that he was a part of this wild assembly of free adventurers. He remembered again Merivale's idea of a man equipped to cope with this lawless gang and hold his own. Suddenly, when he espied his brother Gerd, he shook with the driving passion that had led him there. Gerd sat at a table gambling with Collishaw and Mackay, and some other men of Picacho, well known to Adam. Gerd looked the worse for liquor and bad luck. When he glanced up to see Adam, a light gleamed across his hot face. He dropped his card, and as Adam stepped near, he rose from the table and in two strides confronted him, arrogant, menacing, with the manner of a man dangerous to cross. "I want money," demanded Gerd. And Adam laughed in his face. "Go to work. You're not slick enough with your cards to hide your tricks," replied Adam in deliberate scorn. Temper, not forethought, actuated Gerd then. He slapped Adam with the moderate force of an older brother punishing an impertinence. Swift and hard, Adam returned that blow, staggering Gerd, who fell against the table but was upheld by Collishaw. He uttered a loud and piercing cry. Sharply, the din ceased. The crowd slid back over the sand, leaving Adam in the center of a wide space, confronting Gerd, who still leaned against Collishaw. Gerd panted for breath. His hot face turned white, except for the red place where Adam's fist had struck. Mackay righted the table, then hurriedly drew back. Gerd's fury of astonishment passed to stronger, controlled passion. He rose from Collishaw's hold and seemed to tower magnificently. He had the terrible look of a man who waited years for a moment of revenge, at last to recognize it. "You hit me. I'll beat you for that. I'll smash your face," he said stridently. "Come on," cried Adam. At this instant, the Irishman, Reagan, staggered out of the crowd into the open circle. He was drunk. "Sick'em one's fair sick'em," he bawled. I'm with yous. We'll lick that loidy face and Irydom." Some miner reached out a long arm and dragged Reagan back. Gerd Larry leaned over to pound with his fist on the table. A leaping glow radiated from his face, as if his hate had inspired some word or speech that Adam must find insupportable. His look let loose a bursting gush of blood through Adam's throbbing veins. This was no situation built on a quarrel or a jealous rivalry. It was backed by years and by some secret not easily to be divined, though its source was the very soul of Cain. "So that's your game," declared Gerd with ringing passion. "You want to fight and you make this debt of yours a pretense. But I'm on to you. It's because of the girl I took from you." "Shut up. Don't you have any sense of decency? Can't you be half a man?" burst out Adam, beginning to shake. Ha ha ha. Listen to Goody Goody, mother's nice boy. By heaven, Gerd, Larry, if you speak of my mother here, I'll tear out your tongue. They were close together now, with only the table between them, Cain and Abel. The old bitter story plain in the hate of one flashing face and the agony of the other. Gerd Larry had divined the means to torture and to crucify his brother, whose heart and soul were raw. Talk about the fall of St. Anthony, cried Gerd, with a voice magical in its steely joy. Never was there a fall like Adam Larry's. The Sunday school boy, too sweet, too innocent, too pure to touch the hand of a girl. Ha! Oh, we can fight. Adam, I'll fight you, but let me talk. Let me tell my friends what a damn hypocrite you are. Gentlemen, behold the immaculate Saint Adam, whose Eve was a little greaser girl. There was no shout of mirth. The hall held a low, breathing silence. It was a new scene, a diversion for the gamblers and the miners and their painted consorts, a clash of different kind and spirit. Gerd paused to catch his breath and evidently to gather supreme passion for the delivery of what seemed more to him than life itself. His face was marble white, quivering and straining, and his eyes blazed with piercing flame. Adam saw the living, visible proof of a hate he had long divined. The magnificence of Gerd's passion, the terrible reality of his hate, the imminence of a mortal blow locked Adam's lips and jaws as in a vice, while a gathering fury as terrible as Gerd's hate flooded and dammed at the gates of his energy, ready to break out in destroying violence. She told me. Gerd flung the words like bullets. You needn't bluff it out with your damn lying white face. She told me. You, Adam Larry, with your pure thoughts and lofty ideals, the rot of them. You, damn your milk-sop soul, you were the slave of a dirty little greaser girl who fooled you, laughed in your face, left you for me at the snap of my fingers, and by God, my cup would be full if your mother could only know. It was Collishaw's swift hand that knocked up Adam's flinging arm, and the gun which spouted red and boomed heavily. Collishaw grappled with him, was flung off, and then Gerd lunged in close to save himself. A writhing, wrestling struggle, quick, terrible. Then the gun boomed with a muffled report, and Gerd Larry, uttering a cry of agony, fell away from Adam, backward over the table. His gaze, conscious, appalling, was fixed on Adam. A dark crimson spot stained his white shirt. Then he lay there with fading eyes, the beauty and the radiance and hate of his face slowly shading. Collishaw leaned over him. Then with hard, grim gesture, he shouted hoarsely, Dead, by God, you'll hang for this. A creeping horror was slowly paralyzing Adam, but at the harsh speech he leaped wildly, flinging his gun with terrific force into the sheriff's face. Like an upright stone dislodged, Collishaw fell. Then Adam, bounding forward, flung aside the men obstructing his passage and fled out the door. Terror lent wings to his face. In a few moments, to his feet. In a few moments, he was beyond the outskirts of the camp. Even here, fierce in his energy, he bounded upward from rock to rock until he reached the steep jumble of talus where swift progress was impossible. Then with hands and feet working in unison, as if he had been an ape, he climbed steadily. From the top of the first rocky slope, he gazed back fearfully. Yes, men were pursuing him, strung out along the road of the mining camp, and among the last was a tall, black-coated, bare-headed man that Adam took to be Collishaw. This pursuer was staggering along, flinging his arms. Adam headed straight up the ascent. Picacho loomed to the right, a colossal buttress of red rock, wild and ragged and rugged. But the ascent that had looked so short and easy, how long and steep, every shadow was a lie. Every space of slope in the sunlight hid the truth of its width. Sweat poured from his hot body. He burned. His breath came in labored bursts. A painful stab in his side spread and swelled to the whole region of his breast. He could hear the mighty throb of his heart and could hear it in another way, a deep muffled throb through his ears. At last he reached the height of the slope where it ended under a wall of rock. The backbone of that ridge, bare and jagged with no loose shell on its almost perpendicular surface. Here it took hard labor of hand and foot to climb and zigzag and pull himself up. Here he felt exhausted. But the convulsion was short-lived. His willpower, it was supreme, and his endurance had not been permanently disabled. He crawled before he could walk, and when he recovered enough to stagger erect, he plodded on, invincible in his spirit to escape. From this height, which was a foothill, to the great peak, he got his bearings and started down. "They can't trail me here," he whispered hoarsely as he looked back with the eyes of a fugitive. "And down there, I'll keep off the road." After that brief moment of reasoning, he became once more victim of fear and dispassionate and desperate passion to hurry. He'd escaped his pursuers, and they could not see him now. He could hide. The descent was torturous, yet these apparent facts, favorable as they were, could not save him. Adam pushed on, gaining strength as he recovered his breath. As his direction led him downhill, he went swiftly, sometimes at a rapid walk, again sliding down here and rushing there. And in other places he stepped from rock to rock like a balancing rope walker. The descent here appeared to be a long, even slant of broken rocks, close together like cobblestones in a street, and of a dark bronze hue. They shone as if they'd been varnished, and a closer glance showed Adam the many reddish tints of bisagi cactus growing in the cracks between the stones. His misgivings were soon verified. He had to descend here, for the afternoon was far gone, and whatever the labor and pain, he must reach the road before dark. The rocks were sharp, uneven, and as slippery as if they'd been wet. At the very outset, Adam slipped, and falling with both hands forward, he thrust them into a cactus. The pain stung, and when he had to pull hard to free himself from the thorns, it was as if his hands had been nailed. He could not repress moans as he tried to pull out the thorns with his teeth. They stuck tight, and the blood ran in little streams, but he limped on down the black slope. The white road below grew closer and closer. It was his goal. This slope of treacherous rocks and torturing cactus was a physical ordeal that precluded memory of the past or consideration of the present. When Adam at last reached the road, there to fall exhausted and wet and burning upon a flat rock, it seemed that he'd been delivered from an inferno. Presently, he sat up to look around him. A wonderful light showed upon the world, the afterglow of sunset. Picacho bore a crown of gold, and all the lower tips of ranges were purpling in shadow. To the southward of a wide gray barren road led to an endless bleak plateau, flat and dark, with dim spurs of mountains in the distance. Desolate, lifeless, silent, the gateway to the desert. Adam felt steal over him a sense of awe. The vastness of the scene suggested that the desert seemed to fling at him as if nature meant to reveal him the mystery and might of space. The marvelous light magnified the cacti and the rocks and the winding ranges and the bold peaks and the distances until all were unreal. Adam felt that he'd overcome a great hardship, accomplished a remarkable feat, had climbed and descended a range as sharp-toothed, as jagged as lava. But to what end? Something in the bewildering light of the west and the purple shadows growing cold in the east, in the tremendous oppression of illimitable space and silence and solitude and desolation, something inexplicable repudiated and mocked his physical sense of great achievement. All at once, in a flash, he remembered his passion, his crime, his terror, his flight. Not until that instant had intelligence operated in harmony with his feelings. He lifted his face in the cool, darkening twilight. The frowning mountains held aloof, and all about him seemed detached, rendering his loneliness absolute and immutable. Oh, he moaned, what will become of me? No family, no friends, no hope. Oh, Gerd, my brother, his blood on my hands. He ruined my life. He's killed my soul. Damn him, damn him. He's made me a murderer. Adam fell face down on the rock with breaking heart. His exceeding bitter cries seemed faint and lost in the midst of the vastness of the desert and sky, the deepening of twilight to darkness, the cold black grandeur of the great peak, the mournful wail of a desert wolf, the pure pale evening star that pierced the purple sky, and the stupendous loneliness and silence of that solitude. All these facts seemed nature's pitiless proof of her indifference to man and his despair. His hope, his prayer, his frailty, his fall, his burden of agony and life, these were nothing to the desert that worked inscrutably through its millions of years, nor to the illimitable expanse of heaven, deepening its blue and opening its cold, starry eyes. But a spirit of illimitable and inscrutable breathed out of the universe and over the immensity of desert space, a spirit that breathed to the soul of the ruined man and bade him rise and take up his burden and go on down the naked shingles of the world. Despair and pride and fear of death and this strange breath of life dragged Adam up and drove him down the desert road. For a mile he staggered and plodded, bent and bowed like an old man, half blinded by tears and choked by sobs, abject in his misery, yet even so, the something in him that was strongest of all, the instinct to survive, made him keep to the hard, gravelly side of the road that his tracks might not show in the dust. And that action of blood and muscle, because it came first in the order of energy, gradually assumed dominance of him, until he was an escaping fugitive, most concerned with direction and objective things. The direction took care of itself, being merely a matter of keeping along the edge of the road that gleamed pale in front of him. Objects near at hand, however, had to be carefully avoided. The rocks were indistinct in the gloom. Ocotillo cacti thrust out long spectral arms like the tentacles of an octopus, and shadows along the road took alarming shapes of men and horses and wagons. All around him, except to the west, was profound obscurity, and in that direction, an endless horizon, wild, black, and sharp, with sweeping bold lines between the spurs, stood silhouetted against a pale blue, star-fired sky. Miles and miles he walked in with a strength that had renewed. He never looked up at the heavens. Often he halted to turn and listen. These moments were dreaded ones, but he heard only a faint breeze. Morning broke swiftly and relentlessly, a gray desert dawning. Dim columns of smoke scarce a mile away showed him that Yuma was close. Fields and cattle along the road, and then an Indian hut warned him that he was approaching the habitations of men, and sooner or later he'd be seen. He must hide by day and travel by night. Bordering the road to his left was a dense thicket of arrowweed, indicating that he had reached the bottomlands of the river. Into this Adam crawled, like a wounded, stealthy deer. Hunger and thirst were slight, but his whole body seemed a throbbing ache. Both mind and body longed for the oblivion that came at once in sleep. End of chapter 6.